So news out today about the deficit, and I know that it's going to be really bad because, the Republicans at Fox News have been telling me that Obama is just horrible on the deficit. He's a tax and spend Democrat, and he's been adding to the deficit. Drives me crazy. Okay. Well, look, when he came into office, how much was the deficit? Well, at that point, it was $1.2 trillion. Thanks, Obama. Oh, right, that wasn't his deficit. That was the one that was handed to him on the first day of office. That was George W. Bush's deficit. Well, by 2013, obviously, it had gotten much, much worse. Let me see that number. Wait a minute. That's not worse. That's better. It's down to $680 billion. My God. Wait. Your guy, George W. Bush, who had a Republican Congress for a long time in his two terms, right? For a majority of his two terms. Okay. Now, of course, you remember Clinton left us a surplus. Our deficit situation under Obama has not gotten worse. It has gotten better. The guy who actually screwed up the deficit was a Republican, George W. Bush, let alone Ronald Reagan, let alone all the Republican presidents who added to it. There was, I believe, 1 year where Richard Nixon balanced the budget, but not overall in his term. If you want to go back to a Republican that left a balanced budget in its entirety, you have to go back to Eisenhower. Eisenhower. You like Ike? Okay, well, good. You like the only Republican president who's balanced the budget.
Now that we're all dumber for having being subjected to Cenk's stupidity, just a short rebuttal here, and I have some screenshots go by because I've been through all this before. What Cenk doesn't mention is when you average federal spending, for example, per capita adjusted for inflation under Hussein, and compare that to George W. Bush. Hussein's spending a lot more. What he does is he takes fiscal year 2009, because it was a high point, and use that as his baseline, which is ridiculous. So technically, using his reasoning, what I could do is I could be president and run $1 trillion deficits every single year for 7 years, and then my 8th year have a surplus of $1 and say, "Oh, I handed you a surplus." No, that's BS. Stupid logic, retarded logic from a retarded man. So he doesn't mention that. Actually, Hussein's spending a lot more, over $1,200 more, roughly, per capita, adjusted for inflation, than Bush is, than George W. Bush did. And that's important because even if the debt per capita is going down, that just means the population is growing faster than the debt. But it's important to look at that. I should also mention, how come with those insanely high tax rates in the 60s and 70s, how come that Democrat Congress, because Democrats controlled Congress that entire time, how come that Democrat Congress could never pay down the debt for an entire fiscal year? They never did once, even with those insanely high tax rates, and Medicare wasn't even around the entire time for the 60s and 70s. So, yeah, he leaves that out as well. As far as Reagan goes, he had his faults, but what Cenk also doesn't mention, Fat Boy, and I'll have a screenshot going by for that, what Fat Boy doesn't mention is if you look at interest payments on the debt, they were extremely high during Reagan as a percentage of the debt and in inflation-adjusted dollars, or as a percentage of all spending and inflation-adjusted. For Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, and Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton and his Republican Congress did an excellent job keeping a lid on spending. I've often remarked that Clinton's spending increases were roughly only a third of Bush's when you adjust for inflation. Now, if you adjust for inflation and take out interest payments on the debt, since Eisenhower, there have been 4 presidents that held spending increases to 2% or lower if you adjust for inflation and take out interest payments on the debt. And those guys are Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, George Herbert Walker Bush, and Eisenhower. George W. Bush and Obama and LBJ stick out as notable big spenders. So, and it's getting harder and harder to balance the budget because we have this massive welfare state. we have this massive entitlement state, and we have a global policeman mentality. So we're going to have a president. You're not going to, they couldn't even balance the budget in the 60s and 70s with those insanely high tax rates. So, no. All it does is, it actually, it's like cigarette taxes. You tax the heck out of cigarettes, you'll push it all underground. So Cenk doesn't go over that. He doesn't look at mandatory and related spending as a percentage of all spending. Mandatory spending under Reagan was more than half the budget. So he doesn't go over any of that. I'm just make sure I've got everything. Like I mentioned, the national debt increased every year. Clinton was in office. I find it funny that he gives all the credit to Clinton and then blames Bush when he had a Republican Congress, as if Congress doesn't exist, and I already mentioned that. But, this guy's an idiot. No need to take Cenk seriously. And check the links underneath here. I've got links to all the material where I've gone over this before, so nobody has to guess. Everybody knows where I'm coming from, and I've documented this all. So Cenk Uygur is a huge, pun intended, fountain of misinformation.